Different on purpose. You're tuned to Mission Driven, listener supported WMNF Tampa.
WMNF Fam Jam is a show you don't want to miss. Saturday, February 8th at Bayboro Brewing. Come get your mind blown by the Snozberries and Coke. For tickets and more info, go to WMNF.org.
You are tuned to WMNF Radio 88.5 FM. This is the public affairs program called Community Speaks. And I'm your host, Patro Mabili. And the clown show of the new administration in Washington has begun after 1 week in office. And the Florida governor wants to ramp up deportations. The governor says he would like the power to remove even democratically elected officials from office if they don't enforce the Republican immigration policies. Roundups of undocumented persons now will include previously sensitive and protected places like schools and churches. A judge so far has temporarily blocked 47's order on birthright citizenship after 22 states sued. And the states argue that the 14th Amendment and Supreme Court case law have cemented birthright citizenship, and the district judge in Seattle, Washington called the executive order blatantly unconstitutional. Florida is not one of the plaintiff states. I'll talk more about the 14th Amendment today, and also experts worry that the January 6th pardons will legitimize political violence and embolden extremists. I'd like to know what you think. Confirmation hearings of the clown cabinet continues, with the focus turning to the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is the anti-vaccine extremist nominated to head the $1.7 trillion U.S. Health and Human Services Agency. Moreover, POTUS 47 has paused all research, meetings, and general activity at the National Institute of Health. We will ponder what the hell is going on there. And meanwhile, a laughable use of the threat of tariffs in order to get the world to bow down to the U.S. shows a serious lack of financial literacy on the part of 47 POTUS. But globally, while a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict holds on this Holocaust Remembrance Day, conflict on the African continent heats up. Residents in eastern Congo's largest city of Goma are fleeing after Rwanda-backed rebels claim to have captured the regional hub from Congolese forces. Congo's government said the rebel advance was a declaration of war. And fighting has escalated in recent days despite calls from the UN Security Council for the insurgents to withdraw. We'll talk more about what is happening in that particular conflict, what might be behind it, but we're here to take your telephone calls and talk with you here on Community Speaks. Of course, you can call us at 813-239-9663. That's the number to call if you want to join a discussion about what is happening around you and around the world and in your name, as we are preparing ourselves to resist. Some of us are planning to resist what is happening here in this country in the United States. And you can also email us. You can write dj@wmnf.org. This is Community Speaks, and Irene stands ready to take your telephone calls as we talk about what is happening. Are we prepared for the resistance? Are we prepared to look at the world as it is and respond to it? You know, the Security Council is worried about what is happening and on the continent of Africa right now. As you heard, we referred to the M23 rebels as residents find themselves in the middle of the fighting between Congo's government and Rwanda's rebels, Rwanda-backed rebels. And as I said, the rebels have claimed to have captured Goma, which is a hub city, a regional hub in that particular area. The M23 rebels are one of about 100 armed groups vying for a foothold in the mineral-rich region In this decades-long conflict, one of Africa's largest conflicts, the rebels temporarily took over Goma in 2012 before they were forced to pull out under international pressure and resurfaced in late 2021 with increasing support from Rwanda, according to Congo's government and the United Nations experts. And Rwanda has denied such support of these rebels. But who are these rebels, and why is this regional hub of interest to them? The M23 rebels refers to the March 23rd, 2009 agreement that ended a previous uprising in the region. The group was created in 2012 after the failed integration of ethnic Tutsis who broke away from the Congolese army. It claims it took up arms against Congolese forces to defend the Tutsis from discrimination, but has often talked about targeting the Congolese government. And after a decade of inactivity, the group resurfaced in late 2021 with its leaders accusing the Congolese government of neglecting its commitments to demobilize and integrate Congolese Tutsis into the country's army and administration. Its numbers has since grown from hundreds to around 6,500 fighters, according to the United Nations. But, what role can the United Nations play, and what role in this moment can the United States play when it comes to violence on the globe between neighbors and countries? And so we wonder, how much effect will the United States be at this point on the global stage? And when you look at violence, internal violence, we see experts are worried about the violence here in the United States, political violence here in the United States, as we saw in this first week. The January 6th violent rioters were pardoned. They were all pardoned, 1,500 of them, I do believe, by POTUS 47. So experts are wondering whether or not this is going to embolden the extremists in this country. We know that one of the leaders of the Proud Boys who have embraced violence, Enrique Tarrio, they say he was a former Proud Boys leader, but I guess since he went to jail, he's no longer the leader. But now he's out. He was convicted of seditious conspiracy. And his quote was, "The people who did this need to feel the heat." So I guess there's retribution coming from these violent rioters. And so I wonder, if they were pardoned behind a lie, they engaged in violence to defend a lie. When will we see local pardons of those who were in uprising after the police publicly killed a man on the streets of Minneapolis, Derek Chauvin, while the other cops held the public back from stopping the cop from killing a citizen on the streets of the United States? Because at that time, during the first Trump administration, 45, the police seemed more emboldened to do anything they wanted to do, thinking that their violence would be forgiven by that president. And there was nothing that he could do to defend Chauvin from state charges. But those people who were in protest at the time faced the military. This 45 at the time wanted to throw the military on people, and did, right before he went and held up a Bible in front of the world upside down, because that's a book, he's not really interested in, doesn't understand, doesn't care really about, is the Christianist evangelicals have embraced him. But I digress. The idea that these pardons and the rhetoric of retribution from some of those released this past week is raising deep concern among attorneys, former federal investigators, and experts who follow extremism. And they worry that the indiscriminate release of everyone charged in the riots could embolden the extremists to make political violence more common, including around contentious political issues such as border security and the elections. And this move, according to the Global Project Against Hate and Extremists, doesn't just rewrite the narrative of January 6th. It sets a dangerous precedent that political violence is a legitimate tool in U.S. democracy. And plenty of the charges filed in the sprawling investigation didn't involve violence, and many who received clemency seem ready to move on with their lives. But for some, it could become a megaphone. Homegrown. There's a documentary called Homegrown, which follows 3 right-wing activists, including a Proud Boy who participated in the riot. The director of that documentary says that this, for some, could become a megaphone, this release. He says it's going to build that base of support. So when the next election cycle comes around, there's the potential for 47 to hold on to power or to ensure his successor comes into office. So this sweeping clemency order last week delivered on a campaign promise for the rioters he frequently referred to as patriots and political prisoners. He pardoned or vowed to dismiss the cases of nearly everyone charged in the January 6th riots. And 14 defendants, including several convicted in seditious conspiracy, had their sentences commuted. The order freed from prison people caught on camera viciously attacking the police, as well as leaders of the far-right extremist group convicted of orchestrating violent plots to stop the peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election loss on the part of the new POTUS 47, POTUS 2.0. I don't know what to call him these days. We'll just keep referring to the number. But the former Metropolitan Police Officer, Michael Fanone, who lost consciousness and suffered a heart attack after a riot, shocked him with a stun gun. The rioters shocked him with a stun gun. He said he tried and failed this week to obtain a protective order against those who assaulted him and have been let out of prison. The problem is that he couldn't determine where his assailants live now. Information of this new Department of Justice would have given him if the agency still considered him a victim. But I understand that, like a lot of the right-wing MAGA movement, Florida is a hot spot for a lot of the rioters. A lot of them came from right here out of the state of Florida, some of them right out of Polk County. And the Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd, finally came around and said that he disagreed with just this letting them all out like this. So we'll see where this goes, but we do know that some of them have already, just like in the first term, felt emboldened. The racists felt more emboldened. Now we're going to see maybe those who have always wanted to participate in political violence, because we remember the militias. Domestic terrorism is a thing right here in the United States. These people probably are feeling a lot more bolder right now and will look for opportunities for violence, look for groups. There are groups of people who have been targeted for hatred in this country, including members of the LGBTQ community. People of color, of course, has been a long-standing target of violence from the right wing. And with extremism growing in this country, which is surprising, because, I thought that we were becoming less of a backwater, more of an educated country. But we learned there are a lot of uneducated voters out there who just are having fun with all of this. So we could talk more about how much emboldened people feel. What are you hearing out there in terms of the political violence and after these pardons? I'd like to hear from you. You can call me 813-239-9663. We're 20 minutes into Community Speaks here on your community radio station. And we're just raising a bunch of issues to talk about what the political climate is in this country and how emboldened and how much violence do we expect to see going forward. We see that right before the inauguration last week, that Minneapolis had overhauled its police training and force policies after George Floyd's murder. I think all of that's being reversed because this POTUS does not care about that kind of thing in terms of preventing police brutality, police murder on the streets of the United States. In fact, I think would like to see more use of force in this country and continue to reverse so much of what has taken place. We've seen an attempt to reverse the diversity, inclusion, and equity and inclusion policies at the federal level, and filing suit against corporations, private companies who also have those departments, forcing or suggesting all of those positions should be gotten rid of. And we're going to see more of this reversal, but it doesn't mean that just because there's an executive order against civil rights protections in the workplace has happened under this POTUS that he can overturn the Constitution. There are still constitutional protections for in the workplace against racism, against discrimination. And so we continue to do what those 22 states have done, and that filed lawsuit against the courts make the courts respond. And if you have to, send it to the Supreme Court so that it can be reaffirmed, even though this Supreme Court is dominated by the right wing. There are some things that are constitutionally protected, and I'm certain they don't want to start weakening constitutional amendments. And as we've talked about birthright citizenship, those 22 states have decided to challenge this new POTUS on birthright citizenship. And we could talk more about what that means and why this is a dangerous attempt on the part of this POTUS. But again, it's about the Constitution. And so far, this judge has temporarily blocked the executive order on birthright citizenship after these 22 states have sued. And, it's interesting to see what the judge has said. The states are arguing that the 14th Amendment and the Supreme Court case law have cemented birthright citizenship. And so this judge that blocked it has called it blatantly unconstitutional. Looking at how this birthright citizenship came about, we could talk about other countries having it, but this country was ratified in 1868 in the aftermath of the Civil War. And the amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So this executive order asserts that the children of non-citizens are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and orders federal agencies to not recognize citizenship for children who don't have at least one parent who is a citizen. A key case involving birthright citizenship unfolded back in 1898. The Supreme Court held that Wong Kim Ark, who was born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrants, was a U.S. citizen because he was born in the country. After a trip abroad, he faced being denied reentry by the federal government on the grounds that he wasn't a citizen under the Chinese Exclusion Act. But some advocates of immigration restrictions have argued that case clearly applied to children born to parents who were both legal immigrants. They say it's less clear whether it applies to children born to parents living in the country illegally. And one of the lawsuits aimed at blocking the executive order includes the case of a pregnant woman identified as Carmen, who is not a citizen but has lived in the United States for more than 15 years and has a pending visa application that could lead to permanent residency status. So the question is becoming, is your state suing over Trump's executive order in Florida? That's a no. If your state isn't part of the current lawsuit, there is a suggestion that you should contact State Attorney General and ask what they think of the executive order and the temporary block and whether or not they are considering filing suit or joining in action. We can talk about all of those, but, at the end of the day, one can also argue this is what 77 million voters voted for. They wanted to see this, and, the borders are no more open than they were before Inauguration Day. But what we're seeing is an executive who is basically out of control and challenging the system as much as he possibly can, that we've come to understand and know, and our constitutional rights. So this is what we're faced with in this country. But right now, I'm going to pause, give you an opportunity to weigh in. It's 12:25, and this is Community Speaks. So we're going to go to the phone lines and see what you have to add or how you are responding in this moment. We're going to go to Michigan, all the way to Michigan, and talk with Fred, see what Fred has to say. Thank you for calling us, Fred, here in Florida. Where you say what?
I'm from Marquette, Michigan, up on Lake Superior. I've called you a couple times before, Patro.
Yes, thank you.
And listening to your program, I think it's, you're very well spoken and thought out. You do a really good job, at least of presenting this issue, which is an outrage. To be honest, the freeing of hardening of these criminals, of which I believe 300 had felony criminal assaults, and about 100 of them were a deadly weapon.
Yeah.
It is unconscionable. But you mentioned, that this is what people voted for, and I'm not convinced it's what they voted for.
Yeah.
I think they voted for a smoke and mirror setup where they voted for economy, cable issues, which he said over and over again. And that was a big portion of it, the price of eggs, if we want to talk about it.
Yeah, they're not talking about that now, though. And they're not even holding him accountable.
Not brought up at all. Not part of his, his mandate, his efforts to reduce these prices. And I guess I got to give the man time, 6 months, a year, and I'll certainly be able to make a better judgment. But what I see initially is more about, for all his complaining about woke standards, this is the anti-woke and the antithesis.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the way he's already tried to use tariffs as a threat for anything.
Oh my God! And this Pete Hegseth nomination, his first day at the military, the Department of Defense, he's talking about using the military in an action against immigrants, and that's really not the design. And their language to say that we're under attack is certainly it'll be challenged. And unfortunately, they turned down the legislation that Biden, Harris, and I'm trying to think, was it, the bipartisan committee that put together the immigration legislation back in April last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Langford, Murphy, and I believe Sinema, as senators, put that together, and they had a bipartisan, increasing the number of agents, increasing the judges, which are a huge factor in processing these immigrants. So instead, what we're doing is we're using the military non-trained personnel to just herd these people up onto military flights, which are far more expensive. But anyway, you asked specifically my thoughts on pardons. And I can't tell you my outrage. I've read a couple of legal opinions from some of the judges that sat in, and the prosecutors, and they said you can pardon these people, but the offenses are in record; they'll never disappear.
Yeah.
And the other comment I heard was that expectation is that approximately 80% of these people will have a recidivism. They already have records.
Yeah, and I thought about that. Again. Yeah, we'll hear from them again because they feel so emboldened.
Yeah. But what do we do? My wife has decided to check out. She doesn't want to talk about it, and she's very upset.
And I understand that. There are a lot of people who have checked out so far. I don't even like bringing up a lot of these policies right now because, like I said, it's just really meant to get us gaslit and talking about him.
Yes, it is. It's a distraction from what else is going on. At the World Economic Seminar Conference, he talked about lowering our corporate tax, structure to 15% corporate taxes, which is approximately what we've argued in the World Trade Commission against, because we call that a tax haven. Mm-hmm. And, we've run approximately 20% 30. Eisenhower ran, I believe I've read as much as 40 to 60% when he built the Greatest Generation. He taxed and convinced the corporations. Now, they called him a communist for building highways and, infrastructure.
And we've been stuck in this. We've been stuck in this funk, this political funk between these two parties, because just like everybody should know at this point, the Republican response to the Great Depression was, the market will work it out. Whereas the Democrats had to institute these New Deal programs to make things work by government force. So there's a difference between these two parties, and it continues to this day.
Well, something that happened, post-war, Vietnam War, the race riots of the 60s, the assassination of MLK, of RFK, JFK, that was a dynamic shift. And what happened was Nixon came up with, I believe it was called the Southern Doctrine.
Southern strategy to run. The
Southern strategy, where if you can vilify, the black man, and make the white man feel like he's better off, and it becomes a race issue and of a matter of power politics as to where the economy is. They're going to threaten us that we're going to lose out if the black man does better. The white man will lose, and makes it a us or them contest instead of saying we'll all do better and our economy will do better. And God, if we put women to work, that would actually take care of our labor deficit, which we don't have enough laborers, but we don't provide child care like the other Western countries do. So our women are stuck at home. And I have friends with education, with degrees, who, because they have 2 children, have opted to stay at home. And daycare is too expensive.
Right. That's right.
So they're not working. They're not teaching. They're not nursing. They're at-home moms with degrees in education that could be working in our economy.
It's going to suffer under this capitalist economy. This economy is going to continue to suffer. That continues to be the trend. Hopefully not.
Well, it seems to be, every time the Republicans do this to us, and then even my son that was aware of it, but I think he voted for Trump. He said he's and he was one of the many that, were frustrated with the pandemic response, the mandates, the recovery, inflation, all those things people are angry at. And if I'm right, and I haven't talked too much because my relationship is more important than my politics with him. But at least he alluded to that he would probably just, hold his nose and vote for Trump. And I was kind of sick about it. But he said, they realize that the economy will suffer to a degree, but it'll be better in the long run. And he even said every time in his lifetime, he's 35 now, he said the crashes of 2008 and 2000 were both with Republican administrations in charge.
Yeah,
he knows it.
Mm-hmm. So I think it was the cultural issues that he was most likely responding to, even though what was coming out of their mouth were economic issues. So it's a strange bit.
Well,
political time.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Go.
No, we do need to get to some other callers as we are running out of time, Fred.
I could talk all day with you, so I'll let you go. But thank you so much. It's a great point you bring up. I don't know what's the next step, what needs to be done.
Well, I think events will lead this leader at the end of the day. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for calling us from Michigan, and we'll talk more, lots more. Thank you for calling.
I heard you say Attorney General. Good call. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, sir. That was Fred from Michigan, and we're going to continue to go on. But, like I said, there's a pause on everything happening at the National Institutes of Health. The people are responding to pandemic response, and what do we expect going forward in terms of responding to public health especially pandemics. Doesn't mean that, we're going to have one, but it could happen. And so that response should have given us indicators of what to expect out of this president. He was all over the place. But again, governors are pivotal. If you're from a red state, you probably got a governor bowing down. So let's get back to the telephone lines, 813-239-9663. See what Jack here in Tampa has to add to the conversation. Go ahead, Jack. You say what?
Hi, Petro. Thank you. This is my first time calling on your show. I've really been enjoying it so far, and I think Fred is on point as far as what you guys are discussing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
My response to what we need to do, he didn't offer, a cure or a better way to overcome our economic woes right now. And what I would recommend, I'm not African American or a person of color, but what I would recommend after watching a retired staff sergeant of color talking about his class, he teaches an ROTC class on the high school level here in the Tampa area. And what I've seen from my friends, growing up that are of color, is that they're resilient when you start off being persecuted. And I mean, really being persecuted, that you're more open to helping and being more generous. People of color they donate more than any other race. And, these are statistics that you can verify.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the cure for our economic problems and our problem as a whole is when I was growing up in the 60s and my father was in the Air Force provided what they called the basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic needs meant that there were ranchers, there were, colored cowboys out there wrestling up cattle and providing meals and clothes, the quartermaster corps making the clothes, and the uniforms for our military, providing shelters and a place for them to live. The amount of money that we spend now using private industry to clothe and feed and house our military, and Donald Trump wants to use more of the budget to do that.
Yeah.
And if he had this a little bit more common sense and stop saying these ludicrous things like, change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, when the person who discovered the Gulf of Mexico was the Maxima family,
mm-hmm.
and so they named it the Gulf of Mexico. It's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
And I think it turns off a lot of people, and it does come across as, a hate crime or just hate speech.
Just for the hate, just for the sake of hate.
Huh?
Just for the sake of hate.
Yeah, just for the sake of hate. So, he really needs to do a 360. He needs to be a more nice, generous, religious person that he and his family, I know, are. And I don't know if they're writing these speeches for him or whoever it is. If he's going to fire people in the government, get rid of them first. But as far as the people of color that I know, they go to college, they're having degrees. They're not going to make the same mistakes that, other nations have done. There were people and, there are people in other countries that, have made very similar mistakes. And so I think that the white race in general, myself included, we need to stop taking things for granted. We need to be grateful for the people that are trying to help us survive as a middle class. I'm not the extreme rich like Elon Musk and some of those guys. Even though I know that like Nancy and Bill Gates, they're philanthropists. There are white people in America that still care more about other people than they care about themselves, because they have made enough money. They can't spend the amount of money that they make in a lifetime.
Right.
But I think that people underestimate the people of color. I mean, we're in a state where the first black college was founded,
mm-hmm.
and we need to accept the fact that color has nothing to do with a person's ability to do their job and to do it exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And so that's just my 2 cents worth. Fix the country by fixing the military and, providing food. Have the military provide its own food and its own clothes and its own shelter. Because if you don't do that, it's just like the Civil War all over again when they went into Georgia. They took silverware, they took meat, they took anything that they wanted to put shoes on their feet. And that is not the way the military should run. The military, if nothing else, should be able to go into a war zone or a theater of war and feed themselves. No matter what country it's in. Because all of America suffers. If our military can't provide for themselves, every American suffers. And the money that goes into the military could go towards, fixing the hurricane victims. It could go to California for the fire victims. It could pay for kids' school programs. It could do a lot of things. It's a ton of money.
Yeah, instead we got this guy threatening California in the middle of these fire tragedies. Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome, sir, and thank you for your show.
And a lot of people of color have served in the military, not necessarily in infantry, but as support, and find themselves in war zones just as endangered as those on the infantry. We go to Seminole and talk to Dan. Go ahead, Dan. Thank you for calling Community Speaks. You say what?
Hey, thanks, man. I think we're at a real important point. Maybe it could be an opportunity. They say in every crisis there are opportunities. And I think that you can kind of even feel it. I think Trump might be getting to the point where he could be stepping it a little bit too far, and he's sounding more and more ridiculous. And then even with, even in our state in Florida, DeSantis wanting to have this special session, and the Republicans are saying, what for? So what I think that we have to do is we have to go almost like a constitutional movement, a constitutional civil rights movement again that points out everything that is anti-constitutional. Just like the religious folks take the Bible. They've taken the Bible and made it theirs. We've got to point out where constitutionally they're wrong, and if it means going to the streets about it, yes, but point it out. Because I think we're 50-50. We could change if he keeps sounding more and more ridiculous and does things that are against really the Constitution, firing these inspector generals. That's hurting us.
Right. And that goes for governors in red states because they're acting like them. And like this governor said, he could fire anybody, even an elected official who doesn't go along with his immigration orders. So, that's unconstitutional and that's undemocratic.
But we have to be standing up against that. What we're tending to do is acquiesce. Mm-hmm. It happens, but it doesn't affect me. So we don't start shouting out really loud enough. And that's the thing is that on our side we're like, more live and let live, but that's not. The people that are on the other 50% of the divide, they don't think that way. And we've got to I think we use the Constitution, resurf and get it back to for we the people.
Yeah.
And verbalizing that and owning that. And that is our only chance.
Yeah.
This is the opportunity.
I think you're right.
We got to make Trump look ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think you're right. The Constitution is the best place to start.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Bye.
And you are tuned to Community Speaks, and there are a lot of you calling, so I'm going to go right back to the telephone line. You can also write me as I am seeing some of your emails. I'll try to get to those as well. Go ahead, Daryl in Brandon. You say what? Thank you for calling.
Yes, I would just like to say simply, first, thank you, Kanye West. Yeah, that one who was with Kim Kardashian, who supported Donald Trump and was going to run on the Republican ticket, too. Thank you, rapper Ice Cube. Yeah, him. That one, Ice Cube. Thank you, 50 Cent. The buck-tooth rapper who needs to keep his mouth closed because the breath stinks. Yeah, you supported Donald Trump. And Killer Mike, you supported Donald Trump. All of you guys brought all of this chaos and all of this that corruption. And by the way, with 39 strikes against him, he ain't gonna he can't pardon himself out of that one. Even when he finally does leave office, and some of those corrupt Republicans want to give him a third term, like he's
Putin
president. I can't. I'm so mad right now. I can't think about it. Previous to World War II, who brought us Social Security, and this one ain't going.
Roosevelt
won't take it away.
Franklin D.
But I want to thank all of these people.
You forgot one. You forgot
Which one?
Snoop Dogg, who went to the crypto ball just to shuck and jive, say, "Oh, I'm a real Crip at the crypto ball," because it sounds like a Crip. So that's another sellout.
Well, yeah, true. It's amazing if you could have invested in crypto coin before it was even $1. It's now up to $900,000, which you could have gotten funds. But it's amazing how these people who we supported in the black community and in the Latino community and the white community, and pushed them up. And now they're multimillionaires, but they voted for Donald Trump. But I'm under divine instructions not to call WMNF and not to call the other show on Sunday. So I want to obey God. I want to obey Christ. But God bless you, Mobili.
I want to keep hearing from you, Daryl.
Yeah. But God bless you, Mobili. But
thank you.
I'd rather obey God. Whatever. But hey, God protect us all.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you for calling for Brandon. And we'll go to St. Pete, talk to Mike. Go ahead, Mike. You're on Community Speaks.
Yes, it's good to talk to you again. And I was thinking about the Constitution, and, of course, it was George W. Bush who kind of paved the road for what's going on now when he once described the Constitution as just a GD piece of paper. People forget about all his contributions to the current problems. The Republicans want to get rid of DEI. Well, DEI, diversity, is the plan of the Creator. Equity is what Jesus preached. And, of course, inclusion is what man is mucking up. And, well, we just aren't getting anywhere. Now, today's a perfect example. It's International Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Yes.
I was on Facebook yesterday. I saw a post about Anne Frank. There was a movie on about her the other day on one of the movie channels. And I called up the post, and all of the comments, or at least the ones near the top of the post, which I had to stop reading, all claim that this was a hoax, that this was perpetrated by people who wanted to make money somehow off of the Holocaust. 56% of Americans do not know what the Holocaust was. And all of the Germans who supported Hitler were perfectly aware, the citizens, not the military and his henchmen, were perfectly aware of what was going on at the time, and preferred to remain silent. Our populace isn't even aware of what's going on. We all need to look in the mirror and inform ourselves. The elections are never going to go any differently if we don't, and it's just not happening. One more point, if I may. Governor, what's his name? Oh, yeah, Ron DeSantis. He's against woke. Now, he's against woke because he doesn't want anyone to remember any of this history. He wants to write it along the lines that are going to benefit him and the people who are really paying his salary and so on. And we're doing a good job of just following right along. We don't want to talk about any of that history, and those who don't remember history are condemned to repeat it.
Right.
And here's Trump. You want to talk about repeating history. He fashions himself a modern-day Andrew Jackson. And, of course, Andrew Jackson is the guy who perpetrated genocide against so many Indians on the Trail of Tears and so on, relocating them.
Right.
Now we're relocating all kind of people. Why? So we can build. So they can build high rises on the Gaza Strip as resort areas.
Yeah.
So I'm all worn out from that little diatribe.
Thank you for
Anything else
calling.
I can add?
Yeah, I think you said quite a lot, and you made a great point. A lot of great points. Thank you, Mike.
Talk to you later.
You can see what other callers have to say. Let's go to Christopher in Tampa.
Hey, Mabili, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi. It's great to dovetail off the high-rises in Palestine because I feel like no one's really talking about it the way they should be on people, Democrats scratching their heads and the mainstream media scratching their heads wondering, like, how did this happen? How did several million, they say between 7 to 10 million people, Democrats that voted for Biden in 2020, stayed home and did not come out on Election Day? How in the world did that possibly happen without there being any sort of election fraud? And the answer is that clearly what we saw in Michigan with the uncommitted voter movement that made national news and brought light to what Biden was doing, the Biden-Harris campaign, what they were doing for 4 years, arming Israel, continuing to break the Leahy Law about not arming countries that are committing war crimes or using our weapons against innocent civilian populations.
Well, what president hasn't supported Israel?
Well, there's the conspiracy. That's the problem with the two-party duopoly that we have going on. Our taxpayer dollars funding a illegitimate military occupation in Israel and in many, many, many other countries, our long military excursions throughout history that, talking about DEI and not wanting, and critical race theory and not wanting to look back at our history, I think that plays in part to not wanting an educated citizenry to know what the government has done. Because if we knew what we've done, there's no way honest, hardworking, progressive Americans would support. That's why we came out to protest in Vietnam. That's why we came out to protest the first invasion of Afghanistan, and then that's why we came out to protest the invasion in Iraq. And then all summer long, we've got nationwide, let's call it international campus protests about the genocide happening in Israel. And the mainstream media and the Democratic Party is blankly staring at these protests like, oh, they're supporting Hamas. Look at these kids. They're so misguided. Even Bill Maher, we've got progressive liberals, they couldn't, get it over the goal line and say, listen, these kids are not supporting Hamas. These kids are against genocide. They're against bombing women and children. And even though Israel doesn't allow journalists inside of Gaza, thank God there's Gazans, Palestinians with cell phones recording the aftermath and even recording bombings themselves going off, going viral, and the whole world stands horrified.
Yeah, going forward, because we see that there's been a ceasefire and we see the Gazans are going home, back to the north. This right-wing government, do you trust this will hold? The right-wing government in Israel?
No, it's
or in America, in the United States?
Day. 70-something Palestinians were killed the first day of the ceasefire, and a ceasefire that Netanyahu says, he has the authority to break at any time.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. I'm going to go. Thank you for that. We got to move on. I want to get as many people in as possible. Solar, thank you for calling from St. Pete. You say what?
Yes. Last week, Richard Wolf, economic update, say Trump only won with 30% of the vote. He does not have a mandate.
Right.
So remember this. He only won with 30% of the vote because people didn't go out and participate in the last election. And in reference to DEI, Dr. Amos Wilson said back in the day when we were talking about in the 80s, multiculturalism and all of that. That's just a fraud. Focus, focus. These people have never made that a principle of DEAI, that they can always override what the previous president done. Check with Dr. Amos Wilson. He tell you all about so-called multiculturalism and DEAI.
Yeah, but that's all a fact of life. Diversity, equity, inclusion. You might be right that it's all hocus pocus, but it is a fact of life that, you know, this is a diverse country. Black people need to be able to have at least an ability to get an interview for the job and get the job, not, you know, denied it based on their skin color. So, I mean, I think that's what's in danger of being reversed. So it's...
But no doubt about that, but just like the lawyer Stone Talk was saying, they was coming for these government jobs. That was the predictor that they were going to come after government jobs, preventing people from getting those kind of jobs that made them participate in buying homes and getting a decent salary and all of that. So this is nothing new. As Honorable Malcolm X says, do research. Research is the best reward of finding out what happened in the past and the solution to the problem that's going on. Do your research and you'll see.
That's true. That's true. And getting back to research, the NIH has paused all research on public health. That's worrying, especially when you're given the nomination possibility, the new Health and Human Services person being anti-vax. Go ahead, Stuart. You're on Community Speaks.
Hey, good afternoon, and it's great talking to you. It's my first time in many years.
Thank you.
When it comes to the president firing the inspector generals, I'm sorry to tell all your listeners it's not unconstitutional. It still falls under the president's guidelines. Now, do I agree with what he did? No, because it says the president that any president can do the exact same thing. And when it comes to Harris and the DNC made the call not to let anybody run when Joe was, unfortunately, not able to run. They made the call, and the American voters said, we don't like it, and that is why we have Trump. Now, you may not like that analogy, but look what happened. The DNC caused this. Now,
I don't know if that's true. I mean, 3 months to sort of to broker it at the convention, I don't know if that would have made a damn bit of difference when you're looking at this cultish behavior on the other side. That's all the time we have for today. Of course, next hour, we're going to be listening to... We got to get back to the music with Blaney Whalen. We're going to be listening to a Grammy special. All songs are Grammy nominees. So you want to stay tuned for that. And I want to thank Irene for taking the telephone calls today and all you who called and wrote emails. A lot of great emails. I'm going to have to read them at a later time. I'm certain we'll have an opportunity to talk about all of these issues again going forward. But I do want to thank you for joining me here on Community Speaks here on your community radio station, WMNF. And of course, up next, we're going to get back to the music, but that's following news updates from locally produced news right here at WMNF called The Scoop. So keep it tuned. You're tuned to the best radio station on the planet. And stay tuned all afternoon. Things continue to happen right here. Stay tuned. This is WMNF Tampa.
For employment and better housing. First family moves to a white hood. Second family moves and it's no good. Cross burnings, arson and vandalism. Bombing, shooting, beating and threatening. Those with money dipped out the inner city. The suburbs created for whites only. It's called white flight. It's a business move. In the 50s and 60s around hella smooth. Blacks decline, whites incline. How the bank see it, what you ain't seeing. Disinvestment, stores closing. Landlords is neglecting what they owning. Taking schools and neighborhood parks. There's no money.
Voices that inform, music that inspires. This is WMNF Tampa.
This is The Scoop for Monday.
I'm Megan Bowman with the WMNF